one you stay on. All right. And so then he meets all kinds of characters in this story. Two of them are obstinate and pliable. Now come on. Ever know anybody obstinate? Anybody pliable? Know anybody? What is another one? Discouragement. There's a lot of different characters in this allegorical story. Okay. So as he's moving along on this trail, he falls into a deep, miry, slimy pit called, and this is what, now tell me if you haven't ever felt like this. You're like, you know what, that's my finances, partner, right there. That's my health right there. Turn to laughing at me. Okay? So this is my marriage. This is my work. This is my employment. This is my life. And this is how he fell. He fell into a pit like this, and it's called, who knows what it's called? Anybody? The slough of despond. Okay? The slough of despond. Despond meaning depression, fear, worry, failure. I mean, it is the dark, slimy pit. Now wait a minute. Hold it. He's confused. He's like, and so he calls out for help. Now, obstinate fell in with him, and he gets pulled out. So he calls out for help because there's a character named Help. And he says, help, would you help me? Right? So help pulls him out. But now he's a little disillusioned, and he says, sir, how is it that I met a man by the name of Evangelist who said, he says, I've left the city of destruction, I'm on my way to the celestial city, and I have fallen into this pit. How is that so when this is the trail he told me to take? How come it hasn't been mended? How come it hasn't been fixed? He said, because on this road, there is no way to fix it. That has to remain. It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter, just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're not going to spend a little time in the slough of despond. It doesn't mean you're not going to have some dark days and cloudy nights. And by the way, dark days and cloudy nights, there's nothing ethically or morally wrong with that. Well, there must be some sin in that brother's life. He's going through some difficult times. Really? Seriously, I mean, I know people like this. It's like, you know what? God uses those dark days and cloudy nights to develop us and make us who we ought to be. And so, Christian, having fallen in this slough of despond, and here he is, by the way. Here's a picture of him. Now, he starts out with a burden on his back, all right? And this burden is sin, okay? And when he finally finds a place, when he kneels at the cross and he takes off his burden, the burden of sin, and he's able to enter into the celestial city. Here's another picture of somebody. This is kind of an example of how they were caught in the slough of despond, crying for help. Okay? And there's an actual picture, an illustration from one of the books. A man known as Help entered next in the tale, and he drew Christian out of the muddy travail. The king wills no one be caught in this state. Go on, then, said Help. The ground is good by the castle. So this is part of the book. Now, James says, the book of James says, when trials, consider all joy when trials and tribulations come. He doesn't say, now consider it all joy if you face some troubles. He says, when. We're talking to all of us. When. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. We're going to wind up in a dark, slimy slough of despond. Now, sometimes it's by choice. Sometimes we wind up in that slough because we chose to go there, which is David's position today. Sometimes we wind up there because God just wanted us there so he could prove to us that he could get us out and show us the right way. Sometimes we're there because we took the wrong trail. All right? Now, this is what happened to David. David comes along and he sees, he basically says, okay, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. Now, I see the right way looks real boring. That's a real narrow trail. This trail is really wide, and man, it looks like there's a party going on down there. And I'm tired of being pursued by this king. I'm tired of living in fear. I'm tired of living this way, and we have to fight our way through life. You know what? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Now, I'm in chapter 27, 1 through 6 right now. He says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and don't worry, Vinny, I've got verses coming. He pulled my tail feathers last week, so I didn't have verses for you to read. So, he says, I'll tell you what. I'm going down to live with the Philistines. I'm going to Gath. I'm going to go live in Gath. Well, who came from Gath? Goliath came from Gath, who he'd already stomped a stock pond in him and then stomped it until it was dry, right? He tore this old boy up. Now he's going to live with the enemy. I'll just go there. Because if I go there, he won't pursue me. And sure enough, it says that he didn't pursue him. Right? So here he is. He's looking at, do I want to go God's way? Because I believe God would have had him stay out there and just wait the course. But then God also knew what was going to happen. He knew what he was going to do in his life. So he says, I'm going to go my way. Now, have you ever been faced with this? You know, there's God's way, and there's my way. I really want to go my way, right? And, you know, one of Jacob's examples and heroes is Rich Froning, the CrossFit champion of the world 4 times. And he did CrossFit, was it his first year? Or 4th? These guys posted something on Facebook this week that said, oh, that moment when your dad, your pastor dad uses you as an illustration, right? And said it had this guy in despondency. Anyway, so it was one time, I think it was the first time he went and he got beat. And he said, you know what? And he realized he was doing it for himself. And he decided, I'm doing this for God. And then he won 4 world championships by putting God first place in his life. Well, David said, you know what? I have been putting God first place in my life. Nothing's working out. I'm being pursued. I'm tired of this. Forget it. I'm doing my own thing. Now, when he leaves, he had to know that his 600 men were going to follow him. So he takes his 600 men with their wives and their families. And he takes his 2 wives. Okay? He has 2 wives at this particular point. He takes them with him. So, in other words, his bad decision isn't just going to affect him, right? It's going to affect a whole lot of people. So, what I want to look at right now, and this is 16 months, by the way, is a year and 4 months. That's 16 months of disobedience. 16 months of misery and despondency. And so I want you to put yourself in David's sandals as we take this apart. So we're looking at his doubt, his defection right now. So what are the causes of being in this carnal pit that he's in? What is the cause of David turning his back and saying, I'm going to the enemy's camp? Number 1 is this: humanistic viewpoint. Okay? Humanistic viewpoint. In verse 1 of chapter 27, it says, he kept saying to himself, David no longer was saying, God, what do you want? He was saying to himself. And he was saying, now, when we get into a dark place, when we start talking to ourselves, we can either say good things or we can say bad things. We can say positive things or we can say negative things. We can have self-positive talk or we can have negative positive talk. And we all know what this is like because we've all done it. Okay? But he has a humanistic viewpoint because he starts thinking about just himself, and it's all about keep talking to himself. Now again, put yourself in his sandals. If you do, you're going to understand why he was feeling this way. All right? By the way, you'll never find David in this portion of Scripture praying one time. In those 16 months, we don't see him praying. Now, I'm not saying he didn't, but we're not shown where he did, like we were in the other ones. And he wrote psalms. There are no songs being written here. No songs are being written while he's got his back turned on God. He looks strictly at the horizontal viewpoint. What do I mean? Well, he used to have a vertical relationship, and remember, we need vertical wisdom for horizontal living, which, by the way, makes a cross. We need vertical wisdom for horizontal living. He decided not to look vertical. I'm just looking horizontal, which his son later Solomon did in Ecclesiastes, and we know where that got him. So remember now, he's coming off of a spiritual and emotional high. But he begins to say the wrong things to himself. So that leads me to the second point. Pessimistic reasoning is another cause. Pessimistic reasoning, right? Verse 1 says that, now watch what he says, but David kept saying to himself, someday Saul is going to get me. Let me see if I have that verse. If I have that verse up there. There it is. Someday Saul is going to get me. Now just a minute. This is a guy that just whooped Goliath's tail. He could have killed Nabal. He could have killed Saul again with 3,000 people. God has protected him all along the way, and now he's like, so you see what's happening? He's at a pity party. He's invited, say, 600 men and all of their families to come with him to his pity party. And he's in this, now come on, Well, you're being kind of rough on David. No, I'm not. I'm saying, thank God for David. I relate to this man. I've had my pity parties. I don't know about you. I'm not about you. Well, not me, brother. I read my Bible. All righty then. But I still have days, cloudy days and dark nights. So Saul's going to get me. Where did his faith go? What happened? Notice, and this is why I call it a pessimistic reasoning. Notice what happens. It's all in the future. Someday he's going to get me. Not today, but someday Saul's going to get me. See, pessimists are always looking into the future. At what's going to go wrong in the future. Even if it's at the end of today. All right? And by the way, when you begin to emphasize and verbalize your negativity, you're asking for trouble. Because remember, in the power of the tongue is life and death. So he begins to say, you know what, someday Saul's going to get me. He's telling himself this. And he's verbalizing it. So he's calling it in. He's calling it in. So, a pessimist is somebody who will look at the land of milk and honey and all they see is fat and calories. Come on. Think about this. That's their mindset. So, in other words, a pessimist can look at, they say, well, do you see the glass half full or half empty? A pessimist looks at the glass half empty and says it's empty. They can be half full, and to them it's empty. Okay? Because it's just always what automatically they default. A pessimist automatically defaults to what could go wrong and what is going to go wrong. Okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of examples here in just a minute. And by the way, aren't these people a bummer to be around? Think about the 10 spies. You got the 2 that came back and said, hey, boy, we're going to tear these people apart. Yeah, they're as big as... It don't matter. We've got God on our side. And the 10 spies, but we're like grasshoppers in their side. These guys are just fearful and pessimistic. Yes, but they're going to take us apart. It's like, man, get away from me. I don't need your pessimism. Okay? Now this is interesting because Saul had already told him, Samuel, who was the prophet who anointed him, said, you're going to be the king, David. That's a promise. Abigail said, you're going to be the king. Remember? And then Jonathan told him, you're going to be the king. But even Saul, his arch enemy, said, David, it's pretty clear to me that you're